Welcome back, everybody. We are here at the MIT Bitcoin and Freedom Tech Expo here in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm here with general partner at Ego Death Capital, Nico Lechuga. Nico, you were just part of a very cool panel talking about how all of this important Bitcoin technology that makes Bitcoin more usable, plus other freedom technology like Nostr, how it gets funded. You're in a unique position as a venture capital firm or someone that runs a venture capital firm in this space that invests just in Bitcoin and sort of adjacent technology, freedom tech, but not necessarily the crypto world.
Yes.
It seems sort of like, as you mentioned on stage, there are a unique set of challenges that come with being sort of a Bitcoin only sort of VC fund, not a broader crypto VC fund. So can you talk a little bit about that if you don't mind?
Thank you for having me, Frank.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure to speak to you. I think some of the unique challenges that we sit and that we hit on in the panel are twofold. So the early stage projects, if they're from developing markets around the world, probably the Western venture capitalists and Western funding sources fundamentally don't understand them, as it doesn't fit the mental model that they have as to what a venture-backed company should look like. And it really requires them to travel around the world, feel those pain points of those companies, and then understand that those companies are servicing the market demand signals of the people on the ground. There have been in history of VC funds like Tiger Global that made a killing initially because they went to all these different emerging developing markets around the world and understood that. So I think that that's one component of it. The other component that we sit within Bitcoin is that outside of the Bitcoin funds within the space, there's a handful of them. And there's not an incredible amount of capital. And if a company is really going to be successful, we have to be able to bridge the educational gap with the historical funding sources in venture capital. So your generalist funds, some of your crypto funds, and making them understand why this particular company in Bitcoin is important.
Mm-hmm. Is there any sort of appeal to emotion there? Like, hey, maybe the return will not be as high as if you go and do this other thing, but look what you're funding here. Is that human element a part of the equation when you speak with people who might invest?
I think so. For us, I believe that the return is going to be higher than other areas.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. So historically, I think venture capital was funded to fund projects that would push humanity forward. So think about, like, we're going to put a rocket ship on Mars. Okay. It takes a long time for that to have a return.
Okay.
So historically, when a company is funded, you typically have 6 to 9 years until there's what we like to call a liquidity event, when your money is starting to flow back. What I think really messed this up in the equation with a lot of VCs in the crypto space is the advent of tokens. And I've spoken to a lot of my friends that are actually in that space. And the funny thing is internally at these funds, they don't believe in them.
Interesting.
So the tokens provided early liquidity to the projects, but what ends up happening is that the entrepreneur now has two problems that they are solving. And one is louder. The first problem is a technology that they have put together in some type of white paper that's largely probably academic. It is whiteboarding. It is interesting to a generalist or a crypto VC. The second thing that they're solving is they now have to market this token, because now you have the same problem of a publicly traded company where the market is going to impact that token price.
Right.
And if we historically look at those companies, what we see is that the tokens decline to zero. They're not really solving a real world problem, or they wouldn't need the token. So in our belief, the only thing that has value is Bitcoin. And the beauty of companies in the Bitcoin space, we believe, is that you have a high growth tech company strapped to a Bitcoin miner. What does this mean? This means that you should be able to get the return profile of a high growth tech company. Now, it's going to take years to build that company.
Okay.
It's going to require patience. We're going to have to go back to the foundational building blocks of venture capital, right? The core tenets of that. You are funding a moon project. But when that company does create profits, it'll create profits in Bitcoin.
Right.
So you're creating value, you're buying Bitcoin below the market, and people are giving you value for creating that, or they're giving you Bitcoin for creating that value in the market. And we think that to be seen, whether we're right, but we think during the liquidity events of these companies, the return profile of those companies will be more profound than things outside of it.
Yeah.
That's what we pitch.
I've heard Jeff say something similar, and what I was alluding to before was, yes, there's this whole VCs investing in these tokens that they could sort of dump. They're notoriously sort of dump on the unsuspecting public or the unknowing public, and it's nice to see you guys not doing that, obviously.
Yeah.
Another thing in terms of keeping your ear to the ground in terms of what projects need to be funded around the world, what is that process like? And I'll give some context there. I've seen Jeff Jeff at many events this year around the globe.
Yeah.
So I know Jeff is on the ground in some of these places, keeping in contact with people there, speaking with other people who I know are growing projects in different countries around the world, particularly in the global majority countries in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia. But generally, what is that process like for you? Where are you looking, and how are you looking sort of maybe differently than anybody else doing what you're doing?
One of the things that we pride ourselves on is the intelligence that we're able to gather.
Okay.
So I think a good investor is very humble in what they're doing, and they understand that they're going to look for different sources of gathering intelligence. You hit on this of like, this requires you traveling around the world. So next month, there's the Bitcoin conferences in Vegas. Now, at the same time as that's happening, there's the Oslo Freedom Forum, and there's a Bitcoin conference in Korea. So I'm very, very lucky to work with phenomenal individuals at EgoDeath. So we have Jeff Booth, Andy Pitt, Lynn Alden, Preston Pish, in addition to our phenomenal tech advisors, Lisa Nagut and Pablo Fernandez, and then from the TradFi world, Pete Brigger. All of these are phenomenal intelligence sources, but let's just look at next month. So next month, myself and Lynn will be in Vegas, Jeff and Andy will be in Oslo, and Preston will be in Korea. And we're able to cover all of those different bases and get intelligence from those different bases, in addition to having weekly or bi-weekly meetings with someone like Pablo and Lisa to understand what the devs are working with. All of those intelligence sources filter back and understand, hopefully, what the market wants before others realize it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another side of things, we were talking about sort of protocols underpinning what then a business is built on top of. Maybe touch on that a little bit, like what sort of is a prerequisite in terms of the level of protocol development that's sort of necessary for you to then start saying, I'm going to invest in this business that's then interfacing with this protocol.
Yes, so this is a great point. I think there's a huge bifurcation in the industry between open source protocols that are foundational building blocks for other projects that should be nonprofit organizations. Those developers need funding, they need people to support them, but they should not have the burden of making a profit.
Okay.
Now, from the standpoint of projects within the space, the beauty of Bitcoin is that the vast majority of the projects in it are open source projects.
Right.
If your project is designed properly, that means that you get this almost multiplier effect of you have the internal devs within the company that are working on the project, and then we can look at the other developers external to the project that are just devoting their time into it because they think it's interesting. And there's other building blocks that are being plugged into that. So we look at that. We look at like the user demand that we start to see. We really want to see a market demand signal that sits here. We want to understand if there's a competitive moat that this company can sustain. You want to be solving a real world problem. So a lot of the things that we see in broader crypto that have historically gotten funded because they have a token attached to them are largely academic. And I think we have to abstract away the academic doing something because it's academically interesting to I'm doing this thing because it solves a real world problem and someone's willing to pay me to do that. When we start to see that, and we're a little bit later stages of funds, so historically we invest at the seed and the Series A stage, we start to see those market demand signals. We then do what's called like, what does a pre-parade look like? What is the best case of this company in the future? And then we get excited about looking at a company and funding them and hopefully helping them navigate the bumpy, rocky ride of entrepreneurship.
Okay, sounds good. Excitement is one word I tend to associate with Jeff Booth, who sort of expresses his excitement in a very interesting way. He's very sort of quiet. I like to call him like the Eckhart Tolle of Bitcoin.
He's the Zen master.
The Zen master of Bitcoin. But he has this very infectious ability. I think as does everybody part of your team, there's just sort of this amazement with being alive at this point in time, being able to invest in these companies. I'm imagining, so as a general public watching what you're doing, and Jeff, who's a bit more of like the face of what you're doing, or just a personality in his own right, other people in the investment world have to be seeing this and taking note as well, right? I mean, are you essentially sort of turning heads to get them to sort of see what you're seeing as well?
Jeff he's one of the best at doing it. He might be the best that I've ever met doing it. He is a phenomenal ability to meet people with where they're at.
Yeah.
And that means talking to the person on the street in Abuja to talking to the billionaire that has made his money in a system that Jeff thinks is going to burn down. Right. Or that we're saying is going to burn down.
Yeah.
And the crazy part about it is that Jeff has this unassuming, calm demeanor about him. And he's able to present and connect to them on a human emotional level. And they listen. And he creates like real relationships with them. And I think a lot of that is done through storytelling.
Okay.
And it's amazing to watch. It's incredible to be able to sit where I'm at as being like his partner and service a whole other side of the business.
Amazing. Very cool. As a final question here, we talked about it inside. Femi said when people think about Bitcoin development, let's say they're like, okay, I'll just create a new wallet. I'll make it easy for these people to use. And I'm not even going to lie, even as someone in this space working for Bitcoin Magazine, I tend to have a similar thought, like how is this wallet going to be easier to use? But when we think about Bitcoin and then the broader freedom tech space, I think one of the interesting things is sort of thinking outside the box of even turning Nostr into something that's not just a Twitter clone.
Completely agree.
I'm curious to hear in your mind, what are some ideas that maybe you've heard in these last few years where you're just like truly blown away? And what are you where do you think we're going? Maybe some things that we might be able to keep an eye on in terms of the broader freedom tech space.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting right now, I would say, within the space. I think, again, there's a difference between like what does the Westerner want versus like what is someone in a developing market where money is used as a weapon for them.
Yep.
So in the Western world right now, there's a huge, I would say, interest in projects that allow people in the developed market to take the Bitcoin that they have accumulated and either utilize that to get a loan or lower a loan rate on like a mortgage or a car. No one has solved that yet. There's a number of different applications for that, but that is largely like a developed thing. That's not a problem that we were talking about beforehand.
Right.
I think one of the things in a developing market, and this is largely Femi hit on this, you have to deal with the people that are on the ground and understand like what do they really want. There's a company in the space. I mean, I've interacted with the developer a few times, KG, that does. He's awesome.
Machan Kora for those watching. Yeah, just an amazing ability. If you don't mind, I'll just give a little background on us because I think it'll be helpful to whatever you say there. So yeah, he's developed basically, I don't know if it's a protocol, but a company where essentially you could send Bitcoin over what would be the equivalent of our SMS system. I think it's called SDDS there. Is that what it is? Yeah. He's a friend and just an absolutely genius human being.
He's so smart. Yeah. Meeting with him in Ghana, it was immediately apparent that this is like banking is done differently over there, or how they do their money. It's all mobile, and just the fact of the type of phones that people have and what they have access to, maybe the application as to how we think it isn't even feasible.
Yep.
So that would be something that you would look at and say, okay, this is fascinating. This is someone that's building for a problem on the ground that he acutely faces.
Yep.
I love these entrepreneurs that are solving a problem that they feel every single day.
Yep. Absolutely.
I would say something else that's interesting in a developing market is if we go on the emerging, the phones on being utilized for banking, is you have these discrete countries, and there is an inefficiency currently of the currency conversion between the different countries. Now, a lot of people have hit on remittances in the space, and you can see the price of, let's say you wanted to go Kenyan shilling to Nigerian naira. If you had Bitcoin in the middle of that, you'd probably get more naira on the other side. But no one's done it in a way that the complexity is abstracted away from somebody. And that's, I think, exciting and interesting, and some things that we're looking at.
Yeah, appreciate that. Well, Nico, thank you for sharing your insights. We really appreciate you coming on. We'll talk soon, everybody.
Thank you.